I loved this movie, and I loved it in a way that I have grown to love the story of the Daniel Craig's Bond, but also in the way that the stakes, normally the stakes of drama are sort of a counterweight to great action sequences. But for the last few movies, an arc has been created, and I really thought it would be impossible for me to tear up and choke up at the end of a Bond movie. I was born in 1964, and I read the paperbacks, and I grew up with the movies. And what you guys have achieved in this last cycle, and you crowned with this one, is to bring the stakes into a more wistful, melancholic, profounder place, very profound place. And I really want to tell you that it was very effective and effective. So thank you.
Coming from you, that's amazing. Thank you, Guillermo.
Let me start with you, because I think the very interesting shape, you obviously get this legacy in your hands, and then you have to learn the ropes, so to speak, and then decide what to do as a creator, because your partnership is not just an overseer, but a shaper of material. And I am very, very curious to talk to you about something singular you have done, which is not only bring Bond to the present in so many social and points of view and matters and so forth, but to actually give him weight as a mythological hero, as a humanized figure. When did you start to plan this and how to shape it? Because this is taking a legacy and not only continuing it and making it better, but actually make it grow in a beautiful way. Tell me a little bit of that journey for you.
Michael and I basically decided after Die Another Day that the Bond films had become a little bit too fantastical. And, 9/11 had happened during that time. And so we were trying to figure out what direction to go in. Fortunately, we got the rights to Casino Royale, which my father and his partner had wanted way back in '61, and the rights were not available. They had the book of Casino Royale, which was the first book that Fleming wrote, had been a television play and then was done as a spoof in the '60s. But it really is the coming of age story of James Bond. And so once we got the rights back, we decided that was the film to make. And that is, a story where Bond sort of starts off being a sort of military type figure who gets involved with a woman, falls in love. He thinks she's betrayed him. She's a double agent, and she commits suicide, and he shuts down emotionally and decides he's never going to become involved in an intimate relationship again. So we had to find someone to play Bond, and Daniel Craig was the person that, to me, the only person who could play it, because I felt he had, he would get the complexity. And so I think really Bond was reborn cinematically in that film, and Daniel has been a huge part of that transformation. And I live by a rule my father said. He said, when you're making movies, hire the best people and then create an environment where they can do their best work. And so on this film, we were so lucky that Cary Fukunaga became available and came on as a writer, a director, and really came to formulate this movie, which was incredibly important because it's Daniel's last one. And of course, knowing what happens at the end, we had to find a villain who could stand up to him, and had the chops and could be the one that actually ends up creating the demise. And we all remember Cary, we just wanted Rami from the beginning. And the fact that we got him was a bit of a miracle. So, it's really.
Rami was very, very busy at the time.
Yeah. You were finishing, well, you can talk, but you were finishing your series.
Yeah, I was finishing Mr. Robot, and every chance not every, we somehow, Barbara, you made it happen with the help of the studio, of course, and Cary just scheduled me to come shoot in between. Well, I had a hiatus on Mr. Robot and made it out to Norway from New York, shot for a couple days, tried to figure out what was going on because I wasn't privy to the script at that point. So that came later, and that was an experience, an extraordinary one to see what I was going to be able to do in terms of, as you said, Barbara, the connection to the demise of Bond. But it was a great journey, and I'm glad you guys gave me the opportunity to work that out schedule-wise. It's not often that happens.
Now, let me ask you, Cary, to begin with this. Obviously, you come in. You have an enviable versatility, intelligence, and imprint, because no matter what you're doing, I can tell it's you directing. And there is a certain weight, but also a certain nimbleness and virtuoso moments that I can always see as part of your signature. But you basically have spearheaded every project you've done. And here you come in to a massive moving train, and you have to orchestrate, oversee, and shape dramatically this is somewhat different. And each of your movies and experiences on TV or anything you do is different than the next. This, however, is such hallowed. It's almost like a moving cathedral with wheels on a track. Tell me a little bit of what the first phone call was, how it felt, and how you started to put your arms around this.
I requested to have a drink with Barbara shortly after Spectre. And that was after Daniel had sort of expressed publicly that he wasn't, going to come back. And I just was curious what they were going to do. Our drink was mainly about who could possibly play Bond. It seemed like an impossible task then. So, I mean, I think much to my own pleasure, the fact that they convinced him to come back was one thing. And then being tasked with what is now, the final chapter for Bond was the kind of the meat of the first conversation. It was really just like we sat down in your living room and just, you kind of presented there was a few key points that they wanted to put in the story, and what they kind of playing with and what they wanted to do and what they hoped, emotionally to get out of that story. And it was like a brainstorming session more than anything. We didn't even really have a full conversation. It was just talking about possibilities. And that went on for like 2 or 3 weeks of just talking about possibilities story possibilities until I think Michael's the one who leaned over and he's like, so you want to do this job? and I thought, I thought I had the job. I didn't realize I was still auditioning.
That's a long drink. Remind me never to take you for dinner. I talk from a place of knowing what it is to jump on something giant. Obviously, the proportions are very different. But at one point or another in my career, I had to go from something very intimate to something very large. And I know the first time I did it, I used to wake up in the middle of the night with the sweats, to speak medically. Did you ever get the sweats, Cary?
I think my belly started to increase in size. I think Daniel's trainer called it stress belly. And I think it was just like your body's like, just pumping out like adrenaline nonstop, just trying to because your mind, your body, everything's working constantly, like a computer trying to figure out all the issues you're facing, not just narratively, but also logistically. And like you said, it's a very large machine. But I think also, thankfully, Barbara has assembled over the years a very loyal and a very passionate and dedicated team. And you can't underestimate what that means to have a well-oiled machine like that. And also all people who are extremely generous, right, with their time and their willingness to say hey, you may not have done something before, but here's how we can do it. Let's hear your ideas, but also this is what we've done before. This is my suggestion. Here's some ideas we could do this way, and this goes for stunts. This goes for second unit. This goes for all the different departments that are, having to create a single vision for something as one.
He was
Sorry,
so
Rami?
calm. He was so calm. It was incredible. He was just so calm about everything. I mean, I was, hysterical all the time, as I always am. But he's just very calm about taking this thing on. It was amazing. I didn't
You
know
both
this.
didn't show it.
The
You
only thing that
both
made me
looked quite
nervous,
calm, as far as I was concerned.
Barbara would carry
I thought
around.
everybody was a little too calm, actually.
So zen. No, the only thing that made me nervous is Barbara would carry around this giant 3-ring folder that was the widest 3-ring folder I've ever seen. And at some point I was like, what is that thing you're carrying around? And it was the budget.
Oh my.
And once you realize that's the budget and all the pages that are in it, you're like, oh man.
This is it. But I think that the beauty of, and I would say a legacy and an institution like the Bond franchise, which is really now goes generation after generation of artists and technicians of the highest order, is that you can be, you bring your set of knives as a chef and you come into a kitchen that is a 1 Michelin star restaurant. How did you find that liberating in any other way? Like, did you get to play with a larger train set and enjoy it?
We were shooting at Pinewood for our London sets, for example, and we were using every single spare bit of stage at that time. We weren't the only production at Pinewood, but we were using every bit of stage plus, backlot space we could. And at one point, I think around between like August and October of 2019, there were moments where we were just going around from stage to stage to stage, either reviewing sets, shooting sets, prepping sets, tech scouting sets, or shooting in multiple sets in one day. And it's like, just again, like the amount of people and things and items and cameras. And I mean, we shot on 4 different formats. We had a lot going on, and then also I think in prep tools, I've never done a previs before, for example, for scenes, and being able to sit there and try to figure out the exact sort of timings and movements of shots and, recording like temp audio to try to figure out the rhythm of things. I visited Pixar, I want to say like 5 or 6 years ago, around the time I was promoting Beast. And what I was so envious of at Pixar is how they make their movies there, and they test them and they change the tempo or adjust jokes, like the ability to perfect a film over time and work the story out like it's a living document, right? I found kind of envious and envy making, and I know that there's a magic to like the intensity of film and how short a space it happens in, but I'm not sure if you yourself are a perfectionist, but I know that I am, and the idea to be able to go in there and really hone stuff.
Yeah. Particularly something that depends so much on timing.
Yeah.
When we talk about animation or humor,
Yeah.
it all depends on the delivery and the exact timing.
Yes.
And so action set pieces are the same, which actually brings me, and I will come back to this, but let me go to Rami, because I think it's such a wise choice to go with Rami. And I want to talk to you first about how, of course, you wrote the part for him, but I always say I cast eyes. And I'm dying to work with Rami, because that pair of eyes can give you anything from the sweetest moment to a moment of deranged genius and a depth. And he always seems to be playing 3-dimensional chess with Bond and the movie very significantly has a big start with him as the question mark over the first half of the movie. In creating that character, how many iterations you guys went through in look, in demeanor, and composition?
The backstory of the character went through a variety of iterations and trying to figure out where he was from and how he connected to the rest of the canon, so to speak, and Spectre and everything else, and trying to figure out, how it all tied together in the end. And then, once we figured that out, there's whole things that aren't in the movie at all that are conversations between Rami and I. Rami can speak to it too. Like we went down the whole Tartar route, for example, and then, figuring out like what that backstory meaning for the family and how that would tie you to a crime syndicate like Spectre, and like, and why poison, and tying that into You Only Live Twice and the Poison Garden in that novel, the Fleming novel, and And then I think probably the biggest changes were the cosmetic ones, or the most constant changes were the cosmetic ones, until we found something that, for wardrobe and the mask at the beginning, and, how he would look. But Rami, do you find those to be helpful for the interior work, or are they cosmetic for you?
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the cosmetic aspect of it, and the work that gets done, and the scarring, and of course that affects you emotionally, and think about how that character would have grown up and been looked at, felt just I don't know. I kept thinking just how severe that lifestyle would be, and eyes watching him all the time. And so I remember talking to you and Sutrat, our costume designer, about making sure that he looked elegant, to almost compensate, to say, listen, this may be something that happened to me, but it's not something that I'm going to live by or identify with, or you're still going to respect me in a certain way. And so he had this strong sense of self. And I think that was very empowering, and a strong intelligence, and the ability to create something so powerful that he could have that inner power that didn't require him necessarily getting loud or getting aggressive. There was something so confident about what he had been through and what he had created poison wise, that gave him this sense of integrity and power.
There is a thing that I find very interesting, which is the character basically loses everything. He basically loses his root that ties him to this world, and he offers the possibility to Bond, basically to stay alive, but being unable to ever be near the people he loves, which is ultimately a checkmate of cosmic proportions. Did that game, was there always in the script, or did you guys find it together?
That was something that took me a while to try and crack, that one. We knew that we wanted, if it worked, for Bond to meet his demise in the story and be because of Safin, but we didn't want it to just be like in a gun battle or through, straight, direct, form of violence. And it was trying to find something that tied everything together. And the answer seems obvious in hindsight, given that we, figured out that the weapon was going to be, we knew the device before we knew how it was going to be used. Like, we knew we were using this genetically, this basically DNA targeting weapon. And it seems obvious that should be used in a way to keep him from his family, but it was something that came later.
It's so wise to choose to play a character like this, Rami, because you ultimately know what the end game is. And I find that very compelling as a journey for an actor. You start quite literally with a theatrical no mask. And you do fantastic play with that mask, may I add, because you have to transmit the doubt, the decision, the calculation, the emotional weight with a mask in front of you, number one, and end up completely, the ultimate chess game where it's heading, and you don't have to go to an agitated place or a dramatic place, because the drama already unfolded. How did you map a character that is playing that deep, not only in the plot, but that it's almost like an existential and wistful villain? There's a melancholy. It's a guy that wants the world because he has already lost so much. Tell me a little bit how you understand him.
I think that's it. There's an aspect of him where, because of what he's been through, he has nothing to lose. And there's such power in that. Ultimately, he had the ultimate, technological ability and scientific ability in his hands the whole time. So, like you said, he didn't have to be this loud megalomaniac. I love the idea that, I always wanted to keep him as this coiled spring, and, he could release himself whenever he wanted to. And the way I see villains, I've always fallen in love with the ones that are reserved, and you can't really access them, and maybe a little bit on the quieter side, because you always get this feeling of tension and something brewing inside of them. And that's how I felt about him this entire time, is he had the ultimate power throughout, and it was just up to him as to when to use it. And I found that interesting to play. He never had to raise his voice. It was all about having Bond come to him. Everyone inevitably is going to come towards him.
Well, and then there's the old saying that if you want to be listened to, speak softly. People have to lean in, but even the mannerisms were almost, and this goes back to the mask. And I want to ask Cary how he chose that particular mask and what it means. But the mannerisms felt very contained, very studied, very gentle. The way you move, the way you moved, even on the beginning, it feels completely calm.
I think there's this aspect of, well, you've wronged me. We can discuss philosophy about how we should exist in the world, but you have your answer, I have mine. I'm always going to have my own version of what the right way is, or what the truth is. And this aspect of him being harmed before anything happens throughout the film, it's a card that he can play throughout in these small gestures of, listen, you did this to me first, so it's coming. And that's where I think that the nuanced movement comes from. It's gentle, it's easy, and it's powerful, because he has all the cards.
There's two backstory points that Rami and I talked about. I'm not sure if you remember, Rami, that I think also were just that's minor things, but it does play into like the personal vendetta, which is one. I always imagined that Safin was on his way to that Austrian retreat, where Dr. Swan lives when Bond shows up, because I thought it'd be interesting that, the assumption is that Blofeld poisoned Mr. White, Inspector, but I think it's more fitting that Safin is the one who poisoned Mr. White to complete the circle, since Mr. White is the one who killed his family. So, having basically offed Mr. White, or knowing that he's has a fatal poisoning, he's on his way to Austria to meet the love of his life, and then Bond swoops in. Like I almost feel like there should be like a mini Safin in the background of Spectre, digitized for another release in the future. Just like he's about to like say.
How did you arrive to the mask and what it means in no theater? Because it has a very specific value.
So no theater, obviously has its roots in Japanese culture, and the mask is interesting because, depending on how it's worn, the expression changes, and there's a duality to it. It could be sad, it could be happy, it could be menacing, it could be safe, and if you think about who Safin is, later in the movie he says, you could be my reflection, and it's this idea, this duality that exists between them. And I think every great villain has a duality with the hero, right? There's a splitting of the atom somewhere, and to me that mask has a really nice I guess symmetry for that.
There is an elegance and a symmetry also in the way, Barbara, that you have shaped this particular saga, because look, this is not just a villain wanting $1 billion for this or that. It's a villain that almost wants the world to lose a little bit or a lot of what he had lost. That's already an existential question, but it's so interesting that you pose the first, it's impossible to imagine a man who has more from the traditional figure of the winning man, of the fortunate man than Bond.
Right.
Cars and drinks and conquests and abilities beyond compare. And you start this saga with a big loss. And he experiences first the loss of consequence, and finally he chooses loss. It's one of the most beautifully constructed arcs for a Bond, and is really beautifully shaped. This, to me, reflects as a producer an instinct to where you wanted to take the character. Tell me a little bit, when you came to this incarnation, aside from this is the guy that can personify the brutality, the sophistication, the traits that are paradoxical in Bond, how did you know, or did you know you wanted to take it to ultimately at that melancholic of a place?
I think it goes back to the Casino Royale and to Daniel's portrayal of Bond there, where, you know, he shuts down emotionally. He comes to realize that he can never have the things that other people can have. He can't fall in love. He can't have a woman who, because either she, you know, the villains will use her, twist her, or someone could put a gun to the head of the, you know, the woman, the child, or whatever, and he would have to compromise himself, which he's never done, and is not willing to do. He's incorruptible in his view of good and evil. So the whole journey has been about presenting emotional challenges to him. And this film is about him actually getting what he has always been afraid of getting, which is a family. You know, in the films, he sort of had a family of MI6 around him that he cared about, but for him to actually make a commitment to a woman and to have a child, he never envisioned before. So to put him in that situation and then have the villain, who's also wanting this woman and this child, and to put them up against each other. I mean, I think it's so moving when Rami says, you know, this is a tragedy of our own making. You know, you actually strangely feel sorry for Rami at that point, because, you know, he can't have it either. So neither of them can. And so for Bond to die in a film, we figured, you know, he couldn't just do something suicidal. I mean, you know, we discussed various options, but as Cary said, it came down to putting him in a position where he couldn't breathe the same air or touch the people he loved, or they would die. And so that was not something he could live with.
It's a movie about love. It really is a movie about love, which is remarkable when you think that you can infuse a thematic, a delicate strand into a work of such monumental proportions with the absolute complicity, the absolute engineering and care that means that you and Barbara had to fuse into that, because you are, yes, going to a traditional one Michelin star restaurant, but you're changing the menu. And that is very brave, very beautiful to see. There's a moment, by the way, that I love when she leaves on the train, and she touches her stomach.
Yeah.
And I went, she has a baby.
You knew it.
Well, I'm Mexican. I like melodrama, so I was like, what is going to happen now?
Wasn't she amazing? Isn't Lea Seydoux phenomenal?
Amazing. And I think that's one of the secret weapons of this movie. So, Cary, talk to me a little bit about this thematically in casting, working, you know, Rami and Bond. We'll talk about it in a second, but they represent a loneliness of different qualities. So tell me something about this.
I think it goes back to what Barbara said. One of the first questions you asked her, and she talked about Casino, what Casino meant, and, you know, watching him fall in love and watching him realize he can't love. But it's complex and it's layered, because Vesper Lynd's character also saves his life out of love. You know, it's not black and white. You know, she's obviously has this other person and she betrays him on a certain level, but she still saved his life out of love. And it was something that in the moment he didn't understand, I think. And that's when his heart closed. And I think having in this film, having also the opportunity to work with Lea Seydoux, who obviously was cast before me because she was an inspector, but, you know, be able to work with her and bring her back and add layers to her character and add more complexity and understanding about why she is or should have been the perfect partner for him in the end. And I think a lot of it goes down to in the same way that Rami's character Safin, his reflection, Leia also being an orphan and a child of loss and of killers, and understanding that cycle is someone who is in some ways, you know, his perfect match, his true match. It's his soulmate, I guess. And the trick there then was just trying to figure out why, you know, who is this woman and why should we care about her, and why, and by us caring about her, we understand why he cares about her.
Now, Rami, and this will be the final question, but if you can talk to me a little bit, there was many interesting notes that you hit with your relationship with her character, because it's both a father, but it's also a notion, a savior, and frankly, an executioner in many ways. There are very interesting notes when you are with her. Tell me a little bit about your work with her and your work with Daniel as an actor, and what was at play for you in that.
She is just so visceral of an act. She's raw. Everything Leia does, I mean, take to take, you never know what she's going to do. And that's something I could feed off of, because it was a similarity that the younger actor portraying her early in the film had as well. I think Cary and I often, we were just watching, saying, what's going to happen next, and excited by it, frankly. So there was that element of play that I thought, oh, here's something Safin never had as a kid. You know, he didn't have the opportunity to enjoy himself in that. So there's a bit of, oh, you know what? I might let this kid have that chance to have what I didn't have, but I'm going to come back and see what I've enabled to form in this human being. And then, of course, he takes a liking to that person and has an affinity. In fact, there was one point I remember talking to Cary, and I thought, can we just have more scenes with Safin and Leia's character, Madeline? Because I thought, why not just have Bond have to fight to get to the two of them? And Safin, I always thought, would see Bond as inconsequential. Now, that was, of course, never going to happen. But it was an exciting notion.
What I love about it, and I really was taken, I thought about the No Mask and the fact that he sees himself in that dual position. He can be a life giver and a life taker. And he rules supreme over those notions, and particularly with her. And she's a sibling that he lost, and she's a daughter that he never had. She's so many things. Did your work in creating this villain, I think that when you're discussing what you guys discuss and you had to remove, that you had your chats before production, you had to take out those, I still think alchemically, I could sense all that still in the portrait.
Yeah, I mean, I thought of all the ways that she would affect him throughout his life. I think if you have that moment out on the ice, that's going to play with you for the rest of your life. I don't think there's a day that would go by where he wasn't thinking about his relationship to her, when he would see her again, how he would see her again, and if they would be together as what that relationship would be like when they were together, actually.
That is beautiful, because to me, that's the element of it, that when the mask and the eyes and this heightened game of circumstances is almost like a fairy tale. And I remember one fairy tale that was important for me in creating Nightmare Alley, and maybe I projected. It's a fairy tale that has many versions about a man that sold his shadow. And I think there are variations in Germany and in Hans Christian Andersen's stories and so forth. And I thought the beauty about it is both your character and Bond's character are men without a shadow. One of them at the end gets it back. And if you have not played so delicately and beautifully the fact that there was that certainty and serenity about what you were doing, it wouldn't have played.
Thank you, man. That means the world coming from you, Guillermo. Thank you.
Guys, what a job. What an artistic accomplishment. I mean, just think about it. You were adding a new chapter to the Bible. Genesis, and then let's do this one. And it's so beautiful that it's about loss.
Yeah.
About loss. It's so beautiful. Because in every movie it's about, let's see what James Bond gets. Let's see what he loses. It's so profound, guys. So profound. I thank you. And now I'm gonna swim a little to try to lose a couple of pounds.
Oh, Guillermo, thank you. Stay well. God bless.
Thank you, Guillermo.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
guys.